Colonialism. One of those words we've often heard about in passing sometimes. Is something we've often got to know about through conversations, but rarely have we actually got to discover the true meaning of colonialism. Oftentimes, we're taught about colonialism in such a magnificent way, like the West went and colonized a certain part of the world, and look how heroic we were. We were distributing all sorts of amazing things to the backwards people. And we did them a favor. But what did colonialism result in? What did it mean, really? Were we taught the right stuff? Did we even learn it in school, as we should have done? We're going to be discussing all this and more straight after this. Welcome back to another episode of Magical Musings, part of Beardos Media. We are here today with the usual panel, and we also have a very special guest. Now, this person himself has been known for many other things. Many things. He's been famous. He's been infamous. He's had his fair share of critics. And he comes from a country which fights against colonialism. His heritage is from a community which declines and denies the colonial powers to come and take over. Please give us a warm welcome to Dr. Asif Manaf. Welcome, Asif. Jazakallah khair. Thank you for coming.
Good to see you in person.
Your camera's over there, so you can just say a quick hello to the audience. Welcome to the podcast. We have the usual panel here. Again, we've got Bobby right in front of me. We've got Ustad Kamil, and we've got Barry. And today's topic is one which has been long coming, because it's something that, again, these are things which people talk about in their front rooms or back gardens or amongst the small circle of friends, but they rarely mention these things and talk about them openly in the public spheres. So we thought, you know what? That's exactly what we're going to do, as we normally do. So, Dr. Asif, I've noticed you have often spoken on this subject on Twitter. And tell me why, just to give people a bit of a background, why I mentioned your heritage. Tell us a little bit about your heritage and why you feel this is an important topic for you to continue talking about and getting people to know more about.
Yeah, firstly, Jazakallah khair for having me. I think it's a very brave topic to discuss in a panel, and it's good that you're discussing topics which are, look this way, look that way.
Yeah, any way you want.
Oh, cool. Brave topic to discuss. I think it's unusual, and that's why it's important to discuss these topics, particularly on the eve of a general election, where there's a plethora of South Asian candidates standing for local MPs as well, independents, which some of them I know as well. But yeah, I'm Pashtun background. We're from Jalalabad in Afghanistan, then moved to Kohat in Pakistan, and then now live in Attak. Okay. So we've had a history of various forces, armies, militaries coming, Alexander, the Russians, the Sikhs, the British, the Americans most recently, and then left 3 years ago. So we've had...
Did they really leave?
No, they've not really left. No. I think if you look at the deep
did they
state,
leave you make it sound it was voluntary, like yes. they said, okay, goodbye, we're done now.
I think, we talk about, I think the brother talked earlier about net effect and net gain, about immigration, right? Have we had a net positive impact on the economy? Have we had a net, has it been a, net positive or net negative? And I think America saw Afghanistan 20 years as net negative. They were pumping in so much money. I don't know how many billions they were spending almost weekly on soldiers, on arsenal, military personnel, all that kind of stuff. And the opium wasn't worth it. The gas pipelines weren't worth it in the end. So I think 20 years, you've got to look at ROI, right? ROI. So 22 years later, Taliban came back in power. So, but yeah, they never really leave. You're right. Deep state always persists. And, a big part of any colonial power, because that was essentially colonization, is they may physically leave. Just like the British, we celebrate Independence Day on the 14th of August, which is in about 5 weeks' time. Yeah. But they leave physically, but they never leave mentally or psychologically. And I literally tweeted a few hours ago. It wasn't even anything to do with the podcast today. Yeah. I just came to my mind because I went to Birmingham to have I have laser on my neck. laser hair removal, and I see skin lightening, eye lightening, hair lightening, and subhanAllah.
You look like you've had everything then.
No, not at all. So I literally see that, and subhanAllah. So they've left physically on the eve of 14th of August 1947, but they've not left intellectually. We're third generation. So you're going back to your point about not only my heritage, but more importantly, my kind of medical background. I read the work of Dr. Frantz Fanon. Frantz Fanon was I think, from Barbados or Haiti, one of the Caribbean islands. He was a psychiatrist, medical doctor of French heritage, and he wrote a book called The Wretched of the Earth. In fact, I'll send you.
I remember you mentioning.
Yeah, I think I sent it to you. It's quite a deep book, 100 years ago, and he talks about the French in Algeria, and how Algerians want to be French now. And I've been to Tunisia, by the way. I don't know if you've been to Algeria, but North Africa, many parts of you ask them, are you Arab or are you French? I'm French. And that's colonization. That's the colonized mind. They want to be French. We want to be British still. The Indonesians want to be Dutch. Other parts of the world want to be their colonizer. And in medicine, we call that Stockholm syndrome. Almost being obsessed with your kidnapper, the person that held you hostage.
Sorry, you were going to say something.
Like Doctor mentioned that the two forms of colonization, one was the direct colonization, and then one was the indirect colonization. And like you've spoken about that, the indirect colonization was leaving their puppets and the leaders with the Muslim names to do their job for them. But also indirect colonization was actually leaving the culture. See, when I was speaking the other day with a brother, and previously was slavery, what happened in the Asian subcontinent, now it's IMF.
The World Bank.
One of the things we see that where they give the loans, but then they control the education system within Pakistan. They actually got to take these Islamic culture out and actually go start pushing feminism. All these kinds of things is where
Tajikistan, etc. We saw last week, even this week, hijab ban.
That's right.
So the big loans are given to NGOs to promote feminism, liberalism.
Well, have you heard of George Soros?
Yes.
Have you guys heard of him? No. So this guy, you could say he hates humanity. This guy pumps so much money. He pumps everything, like all his resources. Like he's probably one of the biggest funders of pushing the narrative of sexualization in society. He was one of the biggest champions of LGBTQ stuff. He promotes this concept and funds movies to add more into it. So he's one of the biggest funders of promoting promiscuous, sexualized content, and then adds on to that the gender phenomena that we have today, to such a degree that he spends billions of pounds. He's one of the biggest funders. Now, a lot of producers or even politicians, one of the reasons they will do that in the movies because they get the money for it. And if he pulls out, obviously then they're going to be skint. They're not going to get as much money, are they? So George Soros, look it up for those of you who haven't heard about him. He's very well known for that. On that point, with what you were saying, there's the colonization of direct colonization and indirect colonization. One of the, you still see it today. You go into Arab world. I mean, I worked in the Arab world, and you travel there regularly. All of us have been there at some point. You'll notice that somebody who has a European or a white ethnicity will have the better jobs than the non-European counterparts. It's obvious. You apply for the jobs. If you've got a British passport or American passport or a European passport, you will see that those people, their pay grades are a lot higher than the non-European counterparts.
Which I think is a brilliant point, because I think that's a very important point, mainly because I feel like with colonization, regardless of the language used, you got to look at what's actually happening. And ultimately what's happening is racism. Coming down to the bare minimum of it, it's Britain colonized this, that, India, for example. Britain told them, we are great, you are not. If you want to be great, you've got to want to be more like us. So if you sell out and become more like us, start following the Queen's money and this and that and whatnot, then you will be more respected. We will afford these benefits to you. And we still, many of us, whether we like it or not, we still have these kinds of mindsets. This is what the colonized mind is, because these mindsets are stuck. We can't escape them. It's still the rat race. It's still chasing after money. It's chasing after glory. There was a sociologist who did this study once. And she said, she goes, when it came to the Indians, she said, had the Indians united, they could have easily overthrown the colonial masters.
Yes.
But the problem with them was they were too busy with their infighting. They were too busy, and rather they would drag each other down, other Indians down, as long as it didn't upset their colonial masters. And many of us, like, I still remember when we were younger, the moment police came around to anyone's house, if it was a Muslim or Pakistani or Asian household, they found it so insulting. Why did the police come here? And it's this deep-rooted terror they felt that, are we upsetting our masters? And you kind of still see it going on. There's still people doing this. But ultimately, no matter how you phrase it, imagine if you were to change the countries involved, the wording would be different. Imagine if ISIS tried to colonize, and they said, we're colonizing this land and that. They didn't say we're taking over. They said we're colonizing Syria and Iraq. They would have labeled it as terrorism. But if they did it, we're bringing you benefit. We're bringing you betterment.
The important,
the
important point to remember here is, even when they went into colonized countries, people think it's about pillaging, looting. The modern people will now, with hindsight, think, oh, they pillaged, they looted, and they got the resources from the country. It was all about taking over land and resources. But no, what they don't understand is, it all starts in the mind. Colonization is a seed which is planted in the human mind first, for them to be convinced that this is a better alternative to our current method of doing things, and that's what gives them the permission to do the rest of what they do. Today, we continue that. For some reason, we've seen our own politicians bowing down, bending over backwards to their white counterparts because of the colour of the skin. Bobby, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to come back on, see, heritage, your background from Afghanistan. Grandfather, father must have fought against the empires of the time. And like you say, the independence of some sort, it was there. Do you see, and what's your worry about this discussion now? Why are we talking about it now? Why is it so important to you? Because obviously you've come here. What's it look like in your mind? What is happening in Afghanistan, to be honest with you? Do you still see some of the things that Brother Ibrahim mentioned, influence of international organizations, number one, and number two, is there impact of some of these ideas, for example, feminism, is it affecting the sisters in Afghanistan, etc., or what's your take on it?
Yeah, I think it's affecting Afghanistan much less than it is other Muslim lands because of the Taliban. I think they're doing a good job, alhamdulillah. Like, I fully support them. But I think the tentacles of feminism and liberalism will always be there, whether it's Saudi Arabia, whether it's the most conservative parts of northern Nigeria. Feminism itself, NGOs are funded by people like George Soros, these philanthropists who push liberal agendas, and money talks at the end of the day.
Can I just ask, you said you support the Taliban in their approach. What's their approach exactly? Is it like, for example, you can't have certain TV channels, can't have certain adverts, can't have women on the TV, as an example?
That's right, yeah.
So omitting all of that, is there a counter-narrative?
So I think they try their best to follow the Islamic perspective, as in women should not be in government, they should not hold positions of power. Secular education, universities is not for women, but as a result of that, madrasas have been full. That's free education now for women, alhamdulillah. In terms of, for instance, before, let's say Taliban came to power in 1995, mid-90s, before America came in 2001. So for 6-7 years, they had a coup in the mid-90s, and then America came. So for 6 years, that was a bit more kind of, you could say, a hard line. So they would, openly flog people who shave their beards. Now it's a warning to the barber: do not shave anyone's beard. And if women, women who don't wear the hijab, they will offer them advice and nasiha and say, look, sister, please cover up appropriately. It's a bit more nuanced now, a bit more diplomacy.
And would you say that now that's decolonization?
I think Afghanistan wasn't really colonized. So, like, if you look at South Asia, when I talk about colonization, I talk more about South Asia. Like, Pakistan, Punjab, especially India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, the colonization happened more there because the British didn't really go past Peshawar, if you know what I mean. They kind of stopped at the border. So we'll talk about, and the Russians didn't really colonize. It was for a few years. They tried to colonize. The British were in India for 89 years. So that's proper colonization. That's 3 generations. So when I talk about colonization, it doesn't really apply to Afghanistan. It applies to Central Asia in terms of Russian colonization. So Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, they're trying to de-Russify themselves. Again, that's colonization. But Afghanistan it's almost an exception there. But it's certainly prevalent. And when me and Majid speak about a colonized mind, it applies more to British rule over India when they divided us into martial races and those that weren't martial races. They literally divided us by facial features and height. We saw us as livestock.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, the topic for today's discussion is more geared towards why do we still, living in the West, born in the West, still have this, this thing in our mind that where you see it from some of our elders, and the previous generation are probably more guilty of this than the current generation because they're wisened up a little bit more. But the previous generation were all about coming into this country, newly coming into this country, needed to get things done. They had to request with a begging bowl, we need this, please, can you help us? We need for the betterment of the next generation. Why is it that we still have that begging bowl mentality? And why do we have that inferiority complex when compared to somebody who looks more European than us? Do you see where I'm coming from?
You see,
think
go on, Demar.
Can you limit Bobby again, please?
To be fair,
speaks while we take about 20 minutes. I thought we sorted this out last week. Let's go for that. I think, like you said, the focus, like Ustad Kamal said, was that one of the points being is that colonizing the minds is when you think the only way you can get anything is by going through the master.
Yeah.
There's no other way. And what the master says is
Can I just stop you there for a second? And the only reason I'll stop you there.
Tonight for the food, you can
I'll pay for the food. Don't worry afterwards. I'll buy my minutes. The question is, if we go back to what you just said, you said, why do we have to go back and request it from the master? Who says they're the master? That's my question.
That's the second part. So the point being is the master will tell you that you're never to question me. What I tell you, you do.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. 3 back full, sir.
Yeah. And now, for me, when I was thinking about this, stuck at the train station, I was thinking, one was we can talk about colonialism. Someone gave me a book many years ago, The Blood That Never Dries. How, whether it was in Africa, whether it was in... So that's one
Let me add that to the list, actually. I love reading. Blood That Never Dries. Sounds good.
Really, did they liberate anywhere, or was it more colonization and things like that? But second part was, for me, well, actually, does anyone ever question what the master and the way he lives, is that right, or is there a different way? And for me, that's the real debate today, where whether it's with our children, raising them here, the teenagers, that actually the master tells you that the only purpose you have is to slap as much makeup as you want on, or for the guys to drive a G-Wagon. That's you looking pretty.
I like that.
Yeah, I think it goes deeper than that. And the reason I think it goes deeper than that is because it's not just what the master tells you, but your own perception of what the master is.
That's right.
We're not even touching on at the moment how do you identify who your master is, but what your perceived, what your perception of the master. For example, in Southeast Asia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and all these kinds of countries, right? Why do we have these people wanting to get these skin lightening treatments? Why do you want them to get, things like lenses put in to make their eyes look blue, green, whatever, right? Why do they look to imitate the West? Because in their perception, that is ideal.
I was laughing much because I was always... You got this camera on my head and I'm thinking about a hair transplant. I wasn't thinking about a hair transplant.
Well, now,
every week you put this camera on my head.
Now the camera's going back on your head.
So many people say to me, and subhanAllah, that, actually, bro, do you ever think about a hair transplant? I'm thinking, what?
But who would you want to look like with a hair transplant?
I said you put a cap on like Majid. Why you spend all this money on a hair transplant?
I just put a cap
But
on.
the point for me is that even today we're fighting it. So for me, it wasn't that, like you said, one of the reasons they go and colonize lands. Yes, you can look at it that is to rob the resources, is to make sure they've got their trade routes. But for me, a more deeper point which Majid touched upon was actually to give the world a culture. They actually believe very arrogantly that we know how to live, nobody else knows how to live. You've got to live the way we tell you. And for me, that's what we should really open up today. Because that's what raising teenagers, raising your own children, you see the whole beauty myth, like Majid is saying, that actually, you know, whether it's a worker in Pakistan who can't eat but he's got an iPhone, and all of these things, whether it's materialism they've taken, or, you know, this whole sexualization that we talk about, all of these things, we're fighting with our children now and the Muslim community that actually this is going to make you happy. Or is there a better way of living? Malala was the one, you do not mention, that came out of your country as well, but joking. That really, that's who they wanted to but that's who they wanted to champion, isn't it? That actually, this is how the West perceives a woman. The Muslim countries, they treat women backward. This is the whole education, isn't it, in schools? You oppress women. And the open discussion should be, well, actually, can Islam create a woman, or can the Western capitalism? What life can you give her? Put her on a billboard, sell to... What can you give her?
OnlyFans, $8 a month. SubhanAllah, like that's how much they've cheapened. But going back to the point, it was less than 100 years ago, between the First and Second World War, where, you know, before the Muslim Brotherhood, etc., you had, you know, liberalism and communism spreading in Egypt, okay? And one of the proponents of, you know, you had Ataturk as well in, you know, in the 1920s, all that kind of stuff. So this was the collapse of the Caliphate in 1924, and I'm going all Hizb on you guys now, but it's you know, it's the chronology of events. So 1924, you know, Ottoman Empire, etc., fell, and then Egypt, you know, the secularism spilled through the whole Muslim lands, right? And we can talk about even Qadi Azam, all that stuff. You know, their ideology was very secular, by the way. It was nothing to do with Islam, very secular. Yeah. So Egypt, example, I can't remember the name of this person, but he was one of the proponents of de-Islamizing Egypt, okay, which is a bastion of Islam. Cairo, you know, University, Al-Azhar, etc. And he said, look at these people in the West, the French, the Spanish, the Brits. They are so sophisticated. They eat with knives and forks, and we are like monkeys, still eating with our hands. SubhanAllah. Yeah. That is the beginning of this colonial master power differential. They're better, they're more sophisticated. Yeah. Not knowing that 50 years ago, these were the same Brits that came to Morocco and Egypt, etc., and they smell so badly, you know, and they had to teach them how to wash. Soap was invented in Maghreb to teach these people how to wash. So we know, and we shouldn't be afraid. Islam is ideologically superior
to everything.
To everything.
I agree. 100%.
It's the Sharia is divine.
100%.
And we should say it proudly.
You know, literally from cradle to grave, this Western way of life, it kind of just gives you the answers for everything. Do you know what I feel on this whole topic is, we're born here and we just get on with it. And then I think in our journey, we've realized that actually, number one, why am I here? No one's told me that. I'm studying history in school, but I ain't got a clue, right? So the point about what you mentioned about the history, I think it's so important. The books that you've quoted, etc., everyone's got to go back and read them. Number one. Number two, I think there's what you're doing for summer holiday. They give you the answer, right? How many kids have you got? One brother in this room's got 10 kids. Shock horror. That's the reaction they want.
Aren't you living for yourself?
Yeah.
Do you see?
Don't you have a TV?
So everything, like what you do on Friday, whatever it is, whatever you want to do in life, they will have an answer for it. And
this is the debate, Bobby. Do you see? And also that actually, you question the lifestyle that the system sells you. And if you're a very rational person and you can question what's around you, you'll come to the conclusion that, you know, this is just going to build misery. When I was thinking about it, like Bobby's point is that it tells you that, you know what, look after number one. very selfish lifestyle. And now compare that. You got many people who can, as long as my stomach's full, you can gain materially, you can have everything in this world. That's person number one, what capitalism will build. And look at our ancestors. What did they do? They came to this country. Did they just say, wow, actually, we're here now. Financially, we're better off. And that's it. It says now they brought the whole village over. They married their brothers' kids over, not just their kids. It wasn't a selfish mentality, because we know Islam says your happiness will come not just by looking after yourself, but by others. You're not going to be lonely. You're not going to be suicidal, think, actually, I've got no one to talk to. And that will give you a better feel-good factor than feeding someone else. And it's these kind of discussions. I've got teenage kids. They're the kind of discussion I'm having with them, because I know they're going to enter this world, they're going to be sold a lie. Actually, can they see beyond it? Can I at the age of 40? And it's difficult.
You're not 40, you're beyond 40.
Please, this side, I'm trying to say 40. I'm not the later side.
In my 40s.
Please, yes.
Yeah.
But do you see?
Yeah, of course.
Even that, why is getting old a problem?
Yeah, everything's becoming.
Why
You need to
again?
answer that question. Why is getting old a problem?
All of these things. Why are people old? Okay, you know what now? Even, this
everything's being considered a malady, an illness of some sort.
right.
Getting old is an illness, or doing work at home is an illness, and now you're depressed, or now this and now everything's becoming some sort of illness. But there's a very interesting, and I think you guys have hit on the question anyway. But the point, the question is, why are we so easily influenced into these
That's the good
situations?
That's the question. That's the $1 million question.
And the ulama, they've mentioned a brilliant point. Some of the Muslim scholars, the way they wrote this, and I really like the example they gave. They said, imagine you've got your heart is like a rock. It's a rock, and you've got a drop of water falling on it. Now, one drop of water, that's not going to do anything to the rock. But when you have that drop of water, constantly, after decades falling, it's going to mold the rock into whatever it wants.
Yeah.
We are surrounded by so much, so many different stimuli, so much influence. We've got no choice but to take a lot of it in. There was a study done. It said, on average, the average Brit probably sees more than 1,000 different commercials and adverts every day. And I remember once with my students, I tried doing this. I go, let's all give a list, name all the commercials you saw today. Let's just try. And we couldn't even get up to like 50. But imagine how many subconsciously we're taking in.
Yeah.
So we are so stuck thinking, no, this is a norm. And that's the point. Like, I think with colonization, it's purely been about normalizing a new culture for you. Which, I don't know, part of me now, and I want to throw a spanner in the works here, sorry. I want to throw a spanner in the works. So I was really thinking...
Bobby called it curveball last week, I think.
Yeah. So I really want, and I want you guys to try to understand where I'm coming from, and then
Unpack
destroy it if you have to. But I was thinking about it. I thought, okay, with colonization, it's one culture who think they're superior go in and say, we've got a better way of life. We're going to take over. We're going to do this, feed you the scraps, whatever it might be, all the negatives. But let's assume the positives. We are bringing to you a better, superior way of life. Should you have a problem with that? If you do have a problem, doesn't that show something wrong with you for having a problem with us bringing you a superior thing? However, that's part
question.
of it. But now comes... So the way I understood that comes back to what Bobby said. What Barry said already. He goes, the thing is, Islam offers a superior situation. Yes. So that is the actual answer here. That you guys could try bringing yours, but our job has to be to question those colonizers.
To query
why are you
scrutinize it.
This?
Islam doesn't prevent us from adopting anything which doesn't contradict Islam itself. Right?
The general rules, basically.
In worldly life, there could be innovations which could be good for us.
100%.
Like the clock. Like mode of transport. To calculate time, technology, these could be good things. So our yardstick, our measuring stick, isn't something from our own thinking, what I think. It's what is in my value framework, not my personal feelings. It's not about me anymore. So if somebody brings something
that
better...
value framework could also be questioned. And that's 100%. The beauty of Islam, that Islam allows you that, but the colonizers don't.
Yes.
You see, they impose their value framework and say, no, this is it. And if you, for example, with the Palestine-Israel issue today, the moment you try question it, like if Israel does something and then you ask, why did Israel do that? They are happy for you to ask that question. Why? Because they'll say, because Palestine did da-da-da-da-da. But if you say, well, if they tell you Palestine did this, attacked them October 7th, you say, well, why did they do that? Now you're being anti-Semitic. Like they'd only allow you to question it one way, not the other way.
It's called a narrative control.
Yeah.
You know, they control the narrative. It's called Overton's window. It's a concept in psychology called Overton's window, where the frame of reference has been defined by them.
Yeah.
The ideological parameters are placed by them. And we were colonized. So I did a podcast last year with a Nigerian brother. You can watch it actually. Brother Ridwan, he's a good brother, mashallah, from North Nigeria. The strong guys, mashallah, on Deen. And he said, look, we sold our own people in slavery. Slavery wouldn't have existed if we were stronger on Deen. Because the whole region was Muslim, by the way. 90% of West Africa was Muslim. You know, Gambia, Senegal, Nigeria. We said, we sold our own people. We were strong in Deen. The colonizer would have come to the coast, they would have got battered and left. The Portuguese, the French, the English, they would have left. We sold our people. And this is going back to South Asia. When the Brits landed, we weren't strong in Deen. And we didn't see Islam as a way of life. We saw Islam as a religion. Something to do on Jummah. And you know, it's a very
separation of religion and state.
And just one point I want to make. It's very much, if you look at the Qadianism and all this kind of stuff, and like I've spoken a lot about this, right? Okay. And you know, background in Hizb as well, Islam is inherently political. And this is one thing, you know, all respect to all the madhabs, but something which you find a lot in South Asia, the pacifism of the Tablighi Jamaat, and then you've got the offshoots which are not even Muslim, like Qadianism, etc., which is, you know, complete pacifism, colonial master serving, all that kind of stuff, to turn on the cheek. Islam is not. Islam says if someone comes to colonize you, you defend yourself.
I think this is the point we were discussing, even when there's lots we've discussed.
Sorry, that was a curveball. But
No, alhamdulillah, I like it.
Yeah.
I had my hand up.
Okay, let's set the rules. We have a guest here today, Doctor. You can speak, but you get the most of the mic.
I don't want to get cancelled.
That's right.
Because I can speak a lot about this stuff.
Now, you know what?
No.
Every time he wants to speak, you're free to just say whatever.
He took the show last week, so we're just
No, go
disciplining him.
No, go on.
I think it's like you said, isn't it, that even Islam encourages questioning. You know, it's like we don't follow Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we don't believe because our forefathers believe. We believe because we believe it's the truth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this is a deen not just for Muslims but for humanity. At the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Medina was half were non-Muslim, but they lived under Islam because they felt that it was a better way of life, socially, economically, politically. We could get our rights, but now bring capitalism and let's see which minorities you blame Islam that actually if someone's doesn't believe what you believe, you want to kill them? No. Which minorities have you looked after under your system? And let's look at what Islam looked after. Even in Palestine, it's only Jews, Christians and Muslims only live peacefully under the Islamic rule. Never under what you put there and what you implanted there. We can go through that, read the book, The Blood That Never Dries, whether it's the Irish famine, whether it was what went on in South Asia, all of these things. When you look at these things, you realize that actually what they did. And when you look at what Islam did in comparison, then you realize actually what is the best way of life for human beings. And it's only Islam that, and that's when you have the colonialist mindset where people say, actually, you know, Islam is backwards, it's barbaric. When you don't read and you don't understand, you think, okay, you know what? I just nod my head to the master, but hold on a minute. You want to talk about barbarism, let's look at your history where you went, and let's look at the Islamic history. People
when you do a comparative study, you can see what's what. And I think the important question then is when you label somebody backwards, because I was thinking about this earlier, because a lot of the times when we think about even our own people, when they go back home for visiting back home or whatever, and they say a lot of backwards people over there. There are a lot of backwards people there, or some people associated to a certain part of the country. They'll say that region, there's backwards people over there. Yeah. The question is, through whose lens are you viewing them?
Am I just opening up too many cans of worms?
When
I go to Pakistan, I realise that my basic adab and adab living in Britain is very low.
Yeah.
In Pakistan, whether it's the beggar on the street, there's some adab and adab there. Whether someone comes to your house, he never leaves your house empty-handed, without a drink, without any food or anything. Here, you're scared to knock on someone's front door.
Well, just for the reference, there's a camera pointing right at those desserts, right in the middle of the table.
I'm saying that's where it goes back to that lifestyle. Do you see actually what is backwards and what is forward? Question it. And throw a curveball at, obviously we've got a special guest here today. That one thing I would say in culturally in terms, and you speak about it on your podcast, whereas indirect colonization is, look at now how people will say, and this is guys, not just girls, guys as well as girls, career or marriage. I can't get married until I'm 25, until I've actually got a career, I've got a job. Many people now in their 30s and 40s have missed the boat.
Of course.
Guys and girls, because you know what? Career came before marriage. And for me, that's colonization.
Yes, it is.
I'll leave that to you now.
I tweeted literally.
We'll let you talk.
I tweeted this. It's in Urdu.
Okay.
I don't know if you can play it, but it's literally about that. It's a colonized mind. There's a sister in a niqab from Pakistan speaking in Urdu, and she says, "Look, we were missold." Like,
yeah, I've seen that somewhere. Today. Today or yesterday. I saw
exactly.
somebody.
It's trending on Twitter.
Yeah.
You know, just
Please let the doctor speak.
No.
No, you know what? I totally agree with what Barry says. I would 100% agree. You know, that questioning mentality is the root out of this mindset.
Of course, it is.
Agree. Yeah.
Right? Because, and it's not hard. It is so obvious. These elections, when this is going to be aired, it'll be over. 2-3 issues in the elections were big topics, yeah? Migration, people on the boats, stop the boats, right? The questioning mind will say, okay, why are the people coming over? Why do people want... Everyone loves where they live. They're born, family home, they know the neighborhood. Why would you want to up and leave? No one's even questioned that simple question, right? You stop the bombs, then the boats will stop. Yeah? Simple questioning, and it takes 2 seconds, done. Then the other one, social care bill is through the roof. Okay, why can't you live with your mum?
Yeah.
Your crisis is over. But actually, it was that the master's freedom that he's encouraged you, he's sold you consumerism, chase the dunya, chase this, that, the other. You left your mum. She's rotting away in a care home, and someone else is going to have to foot the bill, right? Career politicians, expediency in their politics, say what they want. What was it? The Keir Starmer got gifts from multiple people, £74,000 worth or something. Yeah. You know, and so he's sold his mouth is sold literally, right?
There's a price.
So then why is it that, hang on, how did he get to that point?
I didn't get any gifts of any Bangladeshis. That's what
Only got mithai.
Yeah. So for us, the questioning mentality would lead us to the obvious points in front of us. We just need to question them. Obvious points. This point Barry mentioned about the girls, not wanting to get married until later on, until they're stable or something, and then they need to have a job. Right, just question that a little.
Yeah.
Right.
Come on, Dr. Asif, let us give us your view on this. I know you talk about this a lot. Career, marriage, missing the boat, colonization. How does that affect it? Are we just blaming colonization?
Yeah. So this can't be colonization. Okay. This is misplaced parental aspirations. My daughter needs to become a doctor and a lawyer. And I mentioned earlier, we need a critical mass. There's no need for your daughter to become a doctor or a lawyer, as in for let's say a utopia, yeah? Caliphate will, be as close to a utopia as we can possibly have, right? Andalus, Ottoman Empire, closest to utopia. Utopia is in Jannah. That's the real utopia. But in dunya, imperfect dunya, that's the closest we can get to utopia. You need, just a critical mass, right? Just 1% of people to become engineers and architects, and 1% of people, just for society to function properly. This kind of conveyor belt churning out doctors and lawyers and engineers and architects for women who are now 60% of university admissions, it's a recipe for them to have, to get into their 30s and then look for marriage. And there's a very good tweet someone did yesterday or today saying, it's a sister saying, I'm gone past, missed the boat now. I'm in my late 20s or early 30s. My parents had a lot of proposals when I was 22. But my parents said, no, concentrate on your education. And now I'm later on, I finished my education, I've got a PhD and a doctorate. Now the same proposals aren't coming anymore because I'm much older, and men value beauty and youth. And that boat is gone. That boat can't be reversed now. That boat has sailed. But what this sister was saying is why is marriage and education mutually exclusive? Education you can do later. Marriage you can't always do later.
Yeah.
You know, you can have nikah and then still go to university if your husband allows you, and after you've had kids. But that age, that window of marriage is finite, and that's your fitrah. Allah's made that window. It's called ovarian reserve. That, Allah's giving you that ovarian reserve. And it's 18 to 22. That's the 4-year gap you've got to have kids, really. Peak fertility of a woman. But at that time, you're doing your doctorates, and that's parental bad advice.
There's actually a sister.
There's
actually a sister who contacted me recently to say there is another sister who's exactly in this position that you just mentioned. She was concentrating on her education and her career, and her parents declined a lot of proposals because they wanted to concentrate on her career. Now she's in her 40s, still single, never been married, and wants to find somebody who she can just settle down with.
And to let Dr. Asif continue, but put it into a bit more of a context. Why I would argue and say that is colonization is because there's two roads you've got. One is materialism. Security is going to happen through having materialism, a house, a car, a good job. But actually, I'm on this right now. My kids are getting up to 17. So when they were doing A levels, then you think university, then you think probably a master's, then a career. But I'm thinking along that path with the girls, how am I going to build and educate them as a mother? The guys, how am I going to educate them to be a husband?
To be responsible.
What education do I need to give them? An Islamic education system, we mentioned in different parts of the world, when the West go, they just see actually academic education. For us, it's far deeper.
Holistic.
We build a human being, whereas they build someone who's a worker. And as you've probably seen on The Apprentice, many of these guys are actually quite thick.
Yes.
They haven't got a clue outside of their box. They've not got a clue. So my point being is, if you can further answer that, actually now you've got these two roads. Colonialism tells you the material road, go and chase it, forget everything else. And then you realize when you're at a certain age that actually I'm very lonely, I'm miserable, I've got no company. But Islam says, yes, educate yourself. Your husband will be there. He'll be the breadwinner. If you need to do it, do it. If not, you've got something else. You're going to build a family unit.
I would say, though, Barry, that's more capitalism than colonialism. More capitalism. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Islam makes holistic. Islam prepares you to be a husband, a rajul, a man, an imam, a qawam of the nisa, and it prepares women to be mothers, daughters, daughter-in-law, sister-in-laws, wives, the one who is willing to be led. But capitalism says, no, you are just a unique tax reference number. That's all you are. You are just a PAYE number. That's all you are. And you're just a cog in the wheel, and educate, pay £30,000 to universities, get a job, and pay 40% of your life earnings in tax. And kind of waste away your eggs.
Rinse and repeat,
You rinse and repeat,
And I think, like you mentioned the point about you just need 1% of in each field. That's a dream that's being sold now. It's being sold in capitalism that everyone can achieve that. But that's literally, statistically, that's impossible.
Didn't doctor just say you need 1% of men to be polygynous as well?
We were having this discussion just before the recording, and 1%.
Sorry, I wanted to get that.
You need 1% to be doctors. You need 1% to be this, 1% to be. As long as you've got that, then a society can function.
Exactly.
But in a capitalist society, we are told you can achieve whatever you want, and it's not as simple.
Not just
as
achieve whatever you want. You could be whatever you want.
You could be, actually. But I think it's a shame, because what that teaches is, if you've got, say, 30 students in a class, and all 30 of them are aiming for top place, that means 29 are going to fail. Now you've set up 29 people who are suffering from some sort of failure, and they're either going to build in depression, and because they're increasing in depression, anxiety, whatever it might be, that also leads on in real life when they're living their actual lives. That leads on to that, where these people are now struggling because this entire system has been telling people you've got to be independent. So you've got no one around you to help. And not only that, when you seek out other people to help you, they're also busy being independent. And so when they're seeking success independently, everyone's working independently, there's no structure, cohesion that you could build with that.
Does
that make sense?
And that's why, Doctor, I divided it, was that colonization, from my own mind, I divide it, was actually the physical colonization. But for me, then the long-term colonization, because they are quite silly, but they're not silly in the sense where in order for them to try to colonize the world, they had a certain plan. So for me, that plan was that actually the culture was capitalism. That for longevity,
divide and conquer.
that's even that point earlier on. The point Ustad Kamal mentioned was, where does that divide and conquer come from? Actually, in order to break the unity of the Ummah,
100%.
they left this. So all of these are clashes of ideology. Capitalism and Islam.
Yes.
We brought not only ourselves as one Ummah, we actually brought non-Muslims into the mix of that. You can't even bring yourselves because of your capitalism.
A great point, because if one family, intergenerational living, and you mentioned earlier about questioning the ideology. Why are you not supporting your grandparents? Why are they in nursing homes? So let's say multi-generational family, intergenerational living is one unit, okay? Let's say that unit, even tax exists in the Muslim world as well. So that's one tax-paying unit. Now that 3 generations family could be divided. You've got 4 brothers, 2 parents, 2 grandparents. That's 8 people. But 8 becomes 1. One family pays the tax. Now capitalism divides that into 8 people.
Yeah.
8 times more tax. So, individualism, individuated silos work better in capitalism because it's the tax
Each
revenue
man for
increases.
themselves, yeah.
So,
This is
this
interesting
sorry,
because
Mike, you talk
after me is Bobby's turn. I'm afraid, Barry.
Bobby's
You've had enough limelight.
As long as
tonight.
he's paying, as long as he's paying tonight, you can talk.
there's
paying,
you know what?
It's paying materialistic benefit from it.
He's paying attention.
This book I was reading, The Electronic Intifada and the Caliphate, written by Asrar Rashid, it actually goes into this about the unfair tax system within the Western world and how the Islamic tax system, it benefits not only the public but also the country to prosper in so many different ways. That's something worth picking up on, but I'm going to give the floor to Bobby.
Had a really good point on taxation, but let Bobby talk now.
The Sheikh Asrar Rashid mentioned there's a good wage slave. That's what people are.
Wage slavery, yes.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
very
that's-
capitalist thing. A serfdom.
Yeah,
The whole concept of serfdom.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. During the, I've completely forgot my point, so I'm just
I'll
going to make
put in
something.
the-
I'm just going to make something up, but that's just not because you lost me now completely. No, I'm going back to something that was in my mind earlier, which is how do you protect yourself and your families and whoever you're responsible, community, safeguard ourselves with all of this. What's the vaccination that we need to give ourselves? So
You can tell he's a pharmacist.
I think in the beginning, this all mentioned about Islam is superior, etc. And involved in madrasa, obviously, Mossad Kamas involved in madrasas, and some of brother Braris as well. And the way I've started to look at this is during this questioning point is at a young age the kids need to start doing it, because very quickly, like I'm speaking to it must be 8-year-old, and he was telling me that we have to sit, because I'll say, look, don't sit with girls. He goes, no, you have to sit with the girl. You ain't got a choice, right? Then it was, okay, how many of your friends have got girlfriends? Quite a few, actually. Muslims, yeah, they have as well, right? What do you think to it? Do you like it? Do you like this idea? And he's like, no, this, yeah. But then I talked to a 14-year-old. It settled in his heart. You could see it in his body language that he would, if he could get away with it, and his dad's chappal wasn't there, he would go down that route.
If everyone in Burton didn't know each other.
Yeah. So for us, it's a case of that getting that questioning mentality in very quickly, because what I think is happening with this ideology is they are injecting it. They're giving us the pill, our children the pill, and we think they're learning ABC 1, 2, 3. No, they're not. They're building personalities that are suiting this
coming out of this system. Yeah.
Going back to just one point, I remember my
I told
point.
you, Mike, you shouldn't let him start.
Just my one last point, sorry. Do you know when this ideology really hurt me? when this colonial thing, it really upset me. Yeah, when I did Hajj, right?
Yes.
And when I did Hajj, I didn't understand a word, yeah, of any of the Arafah, Khutbah, anything. I was like, what on earth? And I'm educated, right? I was like, that's not right. That is not right. How come I don't know my own language? That's how deep this colonization is. And this is why I say, they not only interfered in the culture, what's on TV, this, that, the other. Well, when you go to the shops, there's
and
something branded.
just for the benefit of some of the viewers who might not be Muslim, you're referring to your language. You're not even Arab.
Yes.
But you're referring to Arabic as your language.
Yeah. And having Arabic as being detached from you.
Lingua franca should be,
But later on, when I started learning Arabic, right, one of the teachers, told me about how colonizers detached the Arabic language and created dialects. Yes. So they can't even understand each other.
Yeah. You know, I was watching something earlier on. Somebody said that one of the reasons, I think it was Ethiopia, if I'm not mistaken, it's the only country that's never been colonized. And that was because they all spoke exactly the same language in that country, in exactly the same dialect. And that united them. That unity element prevented them from being colonized. And they fought back. More than 40,000 people of the colonizers were slaughtered. They got killed for attempting to colonize them. And that unity factor is very important because I think you mentioned it, and you mentioned it as well, the divide and rule thing. When you've got a community scattered, you weaken them. And then when you weaken them, this is what the Brits did over in every country that they went. They weakened every community, picked out all the weak points, divided them, and that's how they conquered them.
There's a hadith of the Prophet because talking about how to be divided, what to be united on, then the hadith of the Prophet because I reckon many of us could come up with different things we should unite on.
Yeah.
But the Prophet gives the hadith where he says, pray your salah in Jamaat when you pray together, because shaitan attacks the Muslims who stray from the rest of the group. And he gave the example of the wolf who goes after the sheep that strayed from the rest of the herd. Likewise, I think this is what needs to be united on, that we unite back on deen. We can't unite back on being Pakistani.
Yes.
We can't unite on speaking Urdu. We can't unite on doing this. We come from the same ilaka or anything. It's got to be on deen. Because all of these
that is what unites all the Muslims. Yeah. You go to any Muslim who goes to any other country where there's Muslims, they'll feel like a part of the pack. Yeah. They'll feel there's some familiarity there. They'll feel like there's a part of the family.
I spoke to this, and I can't stand it. I spoke to some elders Muslims who've said, yeah, but you know what it is, son? Even I have a problem with the niqab. And I'm like, what is your problem with the niqab? Like, I don't get it. Like, look at you, you're a Muslim. What? But then you see that it's not them speaking, it's someone else speaking through these puppets.
Yes. Confidence in your own culture,
exactly.
your own way of life. They put it in your mind that actually you're backwards. You believed you're backwards without even questioning them or your own culture.
And they want you to think that you are, they want betterment. They want you to believe they've got your best interests at heart. But I heard a quote not too long ago, and I thought it was brilliant. He said, the white man doesn't, the white man, right? The establishment, they want you to succeed, just not more than them.
Yeah. But this is where it comes back down to, if we recircle all this conversation, it comes down to the reason we start to think like them and even criticize our own, because we view them from the same lens as the establishment, is because we see that person in establishment, because they're usually the upper class, they're usually more wealthy, they usually got the bling, they've got the things that we want as human beings. In our, these are innate desires, worldly desires.
Cars, we want this, we want
those
that,
who have them, we want to associate with them or impress them and say, we're like you. You're trying to get up that ladder. You're not disassociating or creating a difference between the worldly success and the spiritual success. As part, for us, it's an Islamic lifestyle. Whether that includes wealth or doesn't include wealth, alhamdulillah. We'll say that. There's nothing wrong with being wealthy. In fact, it's encouraged in some ways to be more prosperous. Doc, I want to bring the conversation back to you. You and I were having a conversation last time I interviewed you on a podcast, and you mentioned how the colonial mindset can be hereditary and through genetics.
Yes.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so it goes back to the book, a seminal book by Dr. Franz Fanon, and he talks about the genetics of trauma. Now, this is before the DNA was sequenced. So DNA was sequenced in 1998. 1950s, but 1990, I don't know if you guys remember the Human Genome Project.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, kind of let's sequence the whole genome and all that kind of stuff. Took IBM supercomputers to, process it. But in 1950s, they discovered the DNA strand. And he talked about how trauma, he talked about trauma of migration, and he talked about how it can be passed down. But he didn't understand the epigenetics. He just understood the genetics, right? So if you've got a black parent and a white parent, the child will be brown, let's say. That's genetics. And that's basic DNA being passed down. This is fitrah. But what about epigenetics? The DNA you get from your parents has inherited the traumas that they had. The anxiety, the cortisol, the slave mentality. Yes, sir, 3 bags full, sir. You can inherit that as well. You can inherit behavioral patterns. And we've all got kids, right? I've got kids. SubhanAllah, there's similarities in character, right? Even though you might not see your kids. Let's say you have a child and you go to the let's say Timbuktu for 20 years or Mauritania, our brothers do, and read the Quran and become Sufi in 20 years. It happens, right? You've not seen that child for 20 years. Trust me, that child will pick up your traits. Character can be passed down. Just like looks can be passed down, character can be passed down, and bad behaviors can be passed down.
Yeah.
And these bad behaviors of bowing down to power, love of wealth, the G-Wagon you mentioned, and we're seeing it.
Yeah.
We're seeing it now play out on a macro scale. Asians love. We mentioned brotherly. We love brotherly.
Yeah.
We love. Oh, I'm Jodari, I'm Malik, I'm
Divide
Jatam,
and
I don't know all the
conquer.
tribes, but all that
Yeah,
kind of stuff. But we love it.
Yeah.
Tribalism, and it's not from Islam. This
It's
is not
not.
from. Allah says we divided you into nations and tribes so you can recognize one another. Ta'arufu, not for superiority. And we're seeing this now.
And the best of you is the one.
Yeah, taqwa, greatest.
And the beauty about the ayah is taqwa isn't something that is known
Specific to one.
Yeah, and it's not always visible. You don't know who has more taqwa than the other. It's something that only he knows.
And if you look at when the ayah was revealed and Bilal did the Zana, said, look at this black man. And then it was that he was revealed, and the point being is, well, actually, that's how we judge minority communities. People of different colours. You can't even do that today, and they still give monkey chants
I know.
at football stadiums.
Yeah.
Look what Islam produced.
Yeah.
And
We
they're
have
the
that.
kind of debates
We
I'm
have
saying
that
are
issue.
really
The thing is,
healthy debates.
we have that issue
our
in our own
politicians are
communities.
racist, so
Of course.
Kill us
Of course.
down,
Did you
yeah.
see that Khalid Mahmood from your neck of the woods
that
in the
guy's-
masjid, and he says, "This is the problem. You guys aren't educated. You don't even read."
And that's
Like-
the colonialist mindset.
yeah.
I don't want to say,
You're
but
backwards.
listen, I don't want to be judgmental, but when a brother clean shaves and a sister does my hijab, I always take it with a pinch of salt. I don't want to get you cancelled. No, I do. I'm serious. This is colonization playing out.
Yeah.
This is
Mike,
colonization.
I was going to get him cancelled.
No, I'm being honest.
No, I think there's a lot of people who are like, but that's being judgmental. I genuinely believe everyone judges everyone,
Yeah.
whether you like
Yeah.
it or not.
Yeah.
Everyone
There's
has to, you have
always
to judge people.
yeah.
Like I came in, I gave Salam before I knew he was a Muslim. Why? Because I judged him as a Muslim. If I see 20 guys standing outside Yellow Shop now,
Yeah.
and they're all hooded up, I'd be more inclined to cross the road as opposed to if they were dressed in suits.
Yeah.
I'm judging for a
course you
reason.
do.
Yes, of
So
course.
same with people who are dressed in a certain way or carrying them.
Yeah.
I think it was which comedian was it once? I think it was Dave Chappelle still years ago. And yeah, he goes, there's a woman and she's dressed up really scantily and that, and she'll say to you, "How dare you treat me like that?" And he says, "Well, I'm sorry. I mean, if you're dressed in a certain way, I'm gonna treat you a certain way." His words were a little
Dave
bit more flowery.
Chappelle has got some really deep sense of humor.
He does.
He has,
He
yeah.
does.
He's a thinker.
He
He's
is,
almost
you
like a
can tell.
philosopher.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
is.
But I'm just going to go back to one of the points, and he talks about Islam, and let's go back to the Sahaba, right? Radiyallahu anhu ajma'in. May Allah be pleased with all of them. They were from Rum. There was a Rumi there. There was Salman al-Farsi. They were from Habsh, like Bilal mentioned. There was Safiya, who was Hebrew.
Yeah.
One of the wives of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Maria
Yeah.
Qibtiyya from
Yeah,
Coptic.
yeah.
They were from all over. Okay, they weren't just Qurayshi.
Yeah.
Okay, so and they intermarried.
Yeah.
You know, I went to China 2016. Yeah, subhanallah. I went to Guangzhou Canton. Right, they say Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas went there, and it's debatable whether he was buried there, but they said he's buried there.
Wow.
It's debatable, but Sa'ad, he actually did visit China, by the way. He went to Guangzhou and came back, so they got Sahabi well. And they married along the way. All the Sahabi, you know, Sultan, who went to Istanbul, right? One of the Sahabis went to Istanbul because he's got Sultan Ayubi, right? You know, Istanbul. They traveled, and they intermarried, and different. You know, I think one of the Prophet's concubines was black, right? If I'm not mistaken, she was black. Sauda, and one of his wet nurses was also black as well. There's no racism in Islam, but imagine this. Okay, imagine this. You know, your son says, "Mom or Dad, I want to marry this sister. She's practicing, etc." The first thing they'll ask you, where's she from? Not about her deen. Not about her deen. Where's she from? Is she, you know, and she's from Pakistan. Like, is she fair and lovely? That's the first thing, right? Is she Kali? You know, is it Rang Pakai or whatever? You know, like, first thing they say, oh, subhanAllah, this is Jahiliyyah, right?
Yeah.
And I said to the brothers, like, purposely marry DACA. Like, you know, purposely marry DACA. Just break this thing, break it. Purposely marry DACA. Like, literally, from Gambia and all these places, marry, because these are our sisters.
Yeah, of course.
Let's break this cultural, you know.
Cycle, 100%.
I think this was the point we were saying now. We had a concept of one ummah. You don't forget one ummah. We had. You know, sometimes we do this humanity thing, and it's really good. But the point we've got to show is that humanity comes from somewhere. It comes from our core belief, because it wasn't just one ummah for Muslims. Actually, we united humanity.
Yes.
And that was because, that's right, because we didn't have this concept of nationalism. The reason they pulled out of America, they don't pull out of anywhere. America didn't pull out of Afghanistan. Actually, the biggest bond they broke was between Afghanistan and Pakistan. So now they've got Pakistan fighting at the border, because they'll say that, you know what, through Pakistan they will control Afghanistan or that region, and whether it's India, whether it's Pakistan, whether it's all these areas now, they make sure they divide Bangladesh and Pakistan. What happened? All of these, whether it's brotherly, whether it's nation states, they will break that because they see the strength is in unity. And that's where we need to break colonialism and show the Islamic alternative, whether socially, politically, economically. Last point, Majid, I'll stop and I won't talk again. You mentioned tax.
Yeah.
I was reading the book on an economic system, and it mentioned this is where we can talk forever. We can see we're going from one topic. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts things in such beautiful words. And this was the wisdom of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that they spoke very little but very, very to the point. That's it. And one of the points it mentioned that actually Islamic taxation was so people could enjoy family life. And you think about that. But you look at capitalism, what is it? We all work. Even the most wealthy of people, they start at 6 in the morning in the city of London. They don't go home till 10 o'clock. They've got no family life.
No social life.
You got tax upon tax upon tax on everything.
But the funny thing is, in countries like ours, the rich pay less tax comparatively than those poor.
The ratios.
When you do the ratios, they pay less. So those rich get richer. I'm going to give one final word to... thank God for that.
Come on, he
didn't have his hand up.
Come on.
One final point he did. ਮੈਨੂੰ ਇਸ਼ਾਰਾ ਕਰਦਾ ਸੀ ਮੈਂ ਇਸ਼ਾਰੇ ਨਾਲ
coming next week.
ਸਿਆਣੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨਾ ਇਸ਼ਾਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਮਝ ਜਾਂਦੇ. So go on, Bobby, and then I'm going to give the final word to Doc before we wrap this up.
It's a very interesting discussion, alhamdulillah. You know, I benefited myself a lot from this discussion. And I think the final word really has to be given to our brothers and sisters in Palestine.
Sure.
They've resisted, I think, colonialism mentally and physically.
100%. Today, when we see the last efforts of the colonizing of land, that is it.
That is it. And, you know, I'll just give one little story. When we went to the hospital in Cairo.
Yeah, I remember,
And we were handing zakat to some families. And there was a family, there's an elderly gentleman, uncle, and, you know, elderly, our father's age, and in a hospital, lost everything, lost his son, had his wife with him, had his grandson with him, with with a leg blown off, and he was praising us for coming, And the last, he kissed me on the forehead, and his dua, wow, that was so powerful. He said, "Oh Allah, let us pray, all of us together in Masjid
Al-Aqsa." That's a very common dua they say, and I remember that as well. And it wasn't just from him; it was many people.
And I was like, "Wow, right? That is resistance."
Yes.
Do you see? That is a strong mentality. He's got nothing now. He's got tawakkul in Allah, and the amount of praise they do to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
100%.
You
want to see tawakkul?
Honestly, you see it so much.
When you meet them in person.
And
remember, you did some fundraising for me as well.
Yeah. So the praise that they give to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that is resistance, and that is showing a better way of life. And going back to just final thing about Palestine as well, is the children have been buried under the rubble. And this mentality of the masters, I think all of the values that they hold on to has also been buried in the rubble. I think everyone's realized international law doesn't exist.
Yeah, no such thing as
human rights doesn't exist.
Equality.
Democracy is hypocrisy.
Yeah.
Everything. There's freedom for women, women's rights. You're killing our women, man.
No woman has spoken. No woman from the women rights groups has spoken.
I think it's finished. And I think here
100%.
We're a free mind.
Yes. Broken those shackles. Now, on that final note, Doc, and we're going to give you the final note. We're coming close to wrapping this up. What would you like to say as your final comments?
Good point, and I like to finish on that as well, elaborate on that. They say in Gaza, not only 40,000 people have been martyred. What else died is the myth of Western morality. The Western impartiality and this whole never again. They turned the other cheek in Bosnia. They turned the other cheek, supposedly in the Holocaust. They turned the other cheek in all these kind of genocides. We're happening, seeing it in 4K right now. We're seeing it live streamed.
100%.
I speak to doctors who were in the hospitals that were functioning in Gaza. British doctors, British surgeons that went there. They've described like napalm being used and these chemical burns, subhanallah. So the myth, and this is from our own taxpayers' money. You talk about tax. Elbit and all these, surveillance systems and this tech that's being made in the Midlands, right? East Midlands, Leicester, just down the road.
Leicester, just down the
that's
road,
been shipped across using our taxpayers' money. So the myth of Western morality has died. If it didn't die already, it's already died now. So that's it. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala liberate Al-Aqsa in our lifetime so we can pray with them, the children and grandchildren of the martyrs.
Ameen.
I can have 10 seconds on Palestine. I do apologize. I think definitely Bobby spoke about, mashallah, should give him more airtime, a lot more sensible.
That's 5 seconds gone.
5 seconds. One thing that lived in Palestine, they took everything from them. They didn't allow them to colonize them with capitalism. And this is why people are converting just by looking at
100%.
Palestine. You took our homes, you took our wealth, what we built all our lives, but you know what? We're still happy and tranquil. Why? Because we believe in something far greater. And that's Jannah. Better than this life. And the whole world who's been sold just this life thought, hold on a minute, everything's gone. And this is why they still live. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them a long life and destroy the oppressors.
Ameen. Jazakallah wonderful thing to finish on.
Fourth al-Kabir, the best success.
100%. Thank you very much for joining us for another episode on Magical Musings. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and all the good stuff. And let's beat this shadow banning, because we're getting shadow banned for producing content just like this. So if you want us to help beat that shadow banning malarkey, you've got a duty. Like, comment, even. That's all you need to do. It's not going to cost you anything, just a few seconds. Thank you very much, and inshallah we'll see you at the next one. Jazakallah khair.